Okay, we'll start our Excel basics curriculum with lesson 1, the introduction to equations and formulas. The agenda today is we're going to talk about the construction of equations and using constants with equations, using variables with equations, and then some shortcuts. And then after that, we'll do some formula construction, and we'll talk about the differences between equations and formulas and help you understand when you should use one versus the other. So equations are constructed by the user. They're completely flexible. We decide what an equation consists of, and we can construct it to our needs. That's great. The other side of that is that errors are more likely. You're more likely to make a mistake since you're the one constructing it. When we introduce human usage, there's a greater chance for error. So let me give you an example of an equation. So here's my Excel workbook, and if I want to have a basic equation, something as simple as 2 plus 2, the first thing I have to do is decide where that equation is going to reside. Where do I want it to go on the workbook? So I'll just start up in cell A1. You don't have to. It depends on what you need it to do. What makes an equation is the equal sign. So if I just type 2 plus 2 and then hit enter, Excel is just going to say, okay, you're just typing in 2 plus 2. However, if I type equals 2 plus 2 and then hit enter, you'll see it does the math. It goes in and it makes it the number 4, which is the answer to the equation. Okay, so it's very important that when you're using an equation, you always begin with that equal sign. It's very easy to forget it. You create this really nice, complicated equation, and then it doesn't work, and you wonder why. A lot of times it's because of the equal sign. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. The nice thing about this, as you can see, is it does the math. The downside to doing constants, which is what we're doing here, we're putting in a constant number, is that you have to go into the cell and change it. So if I want to make this 2 plus 3 instead of 2 plus 2, I have to go into the cell. Once I'm in the cell, I'll go up here to the formula line, and I'm going to change this to 2 plus 3. All right. So kind of complicated. Now, what that does show us, though, is what this formula line is used for. Right. So we're in the cell. This shows you the result of the equation. This shows you the nuts and bolts of the equation. What's happening behind the scenes. Okay. Now, you might have something like this every now and then. You might do a quick calculation in Excel, but really this is no more effective or no more useful than a calculator. So to really get into the nuts and bolts of Excel, we have to be able to use variables. And variables is when you're taking the value from a cell. And here's what I mean by that. I'm just going to delete this. So let's say that I want to multiply a certain cell number by the number 10. So let's say that I have the number 5, for example, in cell A1. And I want to multiply whatever is in cell A1 by the number 10. What I can do is I'll go to A2 and put my equation here. Is going to click on that cell. I'll click up here in the formula bar. Again, there's my equal sign. And instead of typing the number 5, I'm going to click on the cell. You'll see when I do that, it says equals A1. Now I could type A1 in too. That would work as well. I'm going to click in cell A1, and then I'm going to do my multiplication sign and then the number 10. And you'll see it does the math and gives me 50. Now what makes this helpful is if I want to change the contents of the equation, instead of having to go in here and change the numbers in the formula bar, I can just go to the cell. So if I wanted to make it 7 times 10 instead of 5 times 10, I can just go up here, type the number 7, and you'll see that it changes it. All right, so a lot easier to make changes when you've got variables as opposed to constants. Okay, so we've got, in this example, up here we have a variable, A1, and then we're multiplying that by a constant. We can also multiply a variable times a variable. So let's say that I want to multiply the contents of cell A1 with the contents of cell B1. So I'll go over here to B1 and I'll type in, let's say, the number 2. Okay. And then I'll go to C1 And if I want to multiply A1 times B1, once again, I'm in the right cell, go up to my formula bar, equals. I'm going to click in cell A1, and then my multiplication sign. And then I can either click in cell B1 or I can just type B1. Either way it works. You'll see now that does the math. And now either way it's going to change when I change one of these two cells. So if I want to do 8 times 2, I can change this to 8. That gives me a different result. If I want to do 8 times 3, I can go here. And that will also give me a different result. Okay? So that's very basic usage of formulas. So how would we use this practically speaking? Well, one example might be this. Let's say that I give an assignment, and the assignment is worth 20 points. And I want to know for every point, what is the percentage, right? So if 20 is 100%, I want to be able to look and know what is 15 points. What percentage is that? All right, so I'll type in 20 and then 19. Okay. Now, instead of typing 18 and 17 and 16 and just typing them all in by hand, which can be a little time consuming, once you've got the first two numbers in a series typed in, there's a nice little trick you can do is you would highlight both of them. So click on one and drag down to the other. And then you'll see this little green square in the lower right-hand corner. Put your cursor over that green square, and you'll see it becomes a thin black cross. And then I want to left click on it and keep my left click held down. So I'm going to left click and hold, and then I'm going to drag down. And let's say I go this far down. It finishes the series up for me, right? So I can do the whole series instead of just doing them one at a time. And this is quite nice. Just to give you a couple quick examples, if I want to do multiples of 2, I can do 2, 4, right? And then same thing. It'll do multiples of 2 for me. It even works, believe it or not, with months of the year. So if I do January and February and then drag down, it fills in the months of the year for me. Days of the week works. Dates, right? If I do, June 29th and then June 30, right? You'll see it even knows that it's supposed to skip over to July after June 30th. So very nice little trick. Okay, but what I want to know is, how do I know what percentage each of these numbers is for of 20? Okay, so this one I know is 100, but I want to know that with a formula, or with an equation rather. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to type my equal sign, and then I'm going to click in the cell that I want to use. Right. So in this case, I want to know what percentage is this of 20. And then I'm just going to type in my divided by sign, and then I'm going to divide that by 20. You'll see it gives me the number 1. Now, number 1 is not really what I'm looking for. That's the right answer, but I want to format this properly. So I'll click back into this cell and go up here to the ribbon. So I'm on the home tab of the ribbon, and I want to click on percentage. You'll see it makes it 100%. Okay. I do the same thing here. Type in equals, click on cell A2, and then once again divide by 20. That gives me 0.95. I can change that to a percentage. Gives me 95%. I can do that individually for each one, or if I want to make this quick and easy, once again, I'm going to go to that little square in the corner, get the black cross, and I'm going to click on it and drag down. And you'll see it actually does the math for every cell that I drag over. So it takes the equation from cell B2 and it applies the equation as I move down. So here I've got B2 divided by 20. I'm sorry, here I have A2 divided by 20. This is A3 divided by 20, A4. So you can fill in all the contents of that very easily. Okay. Let's move on and talk about formulas. So formulas are built into Excel. They're a part of the software. So they're easier to use, I would say. They're not as flexible. You can't go in unless you're a Visual Basic coder. You can't really go in and mess around with the formulas too much, but you can use them within specific contexts, and we'll get to some of that later. Because they're built in, though, fewer opportunities for error. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I had a group of grades for a particular student, right? And I have, let's say, they got and we'll say these are all at 20. They got a 19, they got a 16, they got a 17, and they got an 18. Okay. Now, if I want to find the sum, if I want to add all of these up, I could certainly click in the cell where I want the answer to go up to my formula bar, and I could do equals E1 plus E2 plus E3 plus E4, and that'll give me my answer. Okay, I can do that. That makes sense. However, the problem with that is there's a lot of opportunities for me to make a mistake. Right? I can put the minus instead of the plus. I could miss a plus sign. A lot of areas where I can potentially screw that up. So instead, if I just want to quick add them up, there's a formula called sum. And sum, S-U-M, adds up whatever cells you give it. The kind of long way to use sum is, again, click in the cell where you want the answer to go up to your ribbon, choose formulas, and then your formulas here, there are a million formulas in Excel, not literally, but a lot of formulas. And your formulas are all organized by category, right? So some are math, some are text, some are date and time, whatever. Here I can go to math and trig. You'll see it gives me stuff for cosine and aggregate and all this good stuff. I'm just going to go down and I just want to find sum, right? So I'll come down here. I'm going to select sum, right? And then once I click sum, it's going to ask me for the arguments, which, like in a lot of math contexts, basically means what are you using here, right? So where it says number 1, it guessed, and it guessed correctly. It guessed that I wanted to do E1 through E4, which is great. Now, maybe it won't guess correctly, but in this case it did. If it doesn't, or if this is blank, I'm going to put my cursor in number 1, and then I'm just going to highlight the numbers that I want to add up. You'll see when I do that, it grabs those numbers, gives me my preview right here, and then I click OK, and it gives me my answer. Now, whether you use an equation or a formula, either way, since you're using cells, you're using variables. So let's say that I made a mistake and this 16 should have been an 18. I make that change, you can see it gives me 72. Okay. Now, where these can become really slick is if you're going to try to do something mathematically that is going to be kind of cumbersome to have to do as an equation. So if I wanted to find the average of these 4 numbers, right, I would have to go here, click equal, use my percentage sign, add all these up, close the parentheses, and then divide by the numbers, right? So, I mean, you can do it, but it's like I say, it's kind of cumbersome. What's easier is to find a formula, and in this case, there is one that does the work for you. And there's a formula called average. So if I want to find the average of these 4 numbers, again, go to my formulas tab on the ribbon, go to math, and oops, looks like it's not in math. It must be in more function statistical. There we go. Okay, so more function statistical average, same deal. So it's gonna, give me this same display. If I want to add these up or average them, I just need to designate which one it is. So just for practice sake, I'm gonna make this clear. I'm gonna highlight and click OK, and you'll see it gives me the average. So that's a lot easier than just doing it by hand with an equation. Now, your commonly used functions, right? If I go to Home, some of your more commonly used functions are actually on the Home tab, and you've got a couple called Sum, or under AutoSum rather. So you have Sum, you have Average, Count, a couple others. So if I don't want to go through the whole process, I just want to quick and easy add these up, I can click in the cell, go to AutoSum. Now, if I click right here, it's just going to do a sum. If I click this little arrow, it's going to give me some options. So if I want to do a sum, I'll just choose sum, gives me a quick preview. I hit enter, and there you have it. So that's the basic difference, the basic differences between equations and formulas.